There is a quiet habit that millions of people managing diabetes repeat every single morning without ever suspecting it might be undermining everything else they are doing right. They take their medication on schedule, they watch their carbohydrates carefully, they choose their breakfast with intention, they walk after meals, they do everything their doctor has asked them to do, and yet their morning glucose readings remain stubbornly high. Their after-breakfast numbers spike in ways they cannot explain. And the frustration of doing everything right while the numbers refuse to cooperate is one of the most demoralizing experiences a person with diabetes can face. What most people never think to question is the glass of milk sitting right there on the breakfast table, the one they have been drinking their entire life, the one their parents gave them as children, the one that every public health campaign for the past 5 decades has told them is healthy, essential, and good for their bones. And in many ways, that guidance is not wrong. But here is what that guidance has never fully addressed. Not all milk behaves the same way inside the body of someone managing diabetes. Some types of milk can raise blood sugar as significantly as a sweetened beverage. Others produce almost no glucose response at all. The same volume, the same moment in the morning routine, but a completely different outcome in the bloodstream. And the majority of people with diabetes have never been given a clear explanation of which is which. I am Dr. Andrew Parker, and you are watching Vital Health Insights. I have been practicing preventive medicine for over 25 years, with a particular focus on helping adults over 50 manage chronic conditions like diabetes in ways that are practical, sustainable, and genuinely grounded in evidence. Today, I am going to walk you through 8 different types of milk ranked from the most supportive to the most problematic for blood sugar management. I will explain the science behind each one in plain language, share real examples from clinical practice, and give you a simple home test you can use to discover exactly how your own body responds to whatever milk you are currently drinking. If you enjoy clear, practical, evidence-informed health advice tailored for adults over 50, consider subscribing to Vital Health Insights and joining our growing community. Now let us get into this. Before we look at the individual milk options, I want to give you a brief but important foundation because it will help everything else make far more sense. When you have diabetes, your body processes carbohydrates differently than it would in someone without the condition. The rate at which sugar enters your bloodstream matters considerably more. The insulin response is less predictable. And the cumulative effect of multiple small carbohydrate sources at the same meal adds up in ways that can produce readings you would never have anticipated based on any single food alone. Standard dairy milk contains a naturally occurring sugar called lactose. A single cup contains approximately 12 to 13 grams of lactose. For many adults over 60 who are managing diabetes, that lactose can contribute meaningfully to a morning glucose spike that layers on top of everything else in the breakfast. And because it happens gradually, and because milk has always been considered a health food, most people never connect the morning reading to the glass they just finished drinking. The good news is that there are alternatives available in virtually every grocery store today that contain almost no natural sugars, produce minimal blood sugar impact, and can be genuinely straightforward substitutions once you understand how to choose them correctly. Let us look at all 8. The first and most consistently recommended option for my patients managing diabetes is unsweetened almond milk. This is the one I suggest most frequently, and the reason is straightforward when you look at the numbers. Unsweetened almond milk contains approximately 1 to 2 grams of carbohydrates per cup. Compare that to the 12 to 13 grams in a cup of dairy milk, and you begin to understand why the blood sugar response is so dramatically different. The fats in almond milk come from natural almonds, and some research suggests this type of fat may support cardiovascular health, which matters considerably for people with diabetes who carry a statistically elevated risk of heart-related complications. Almond milk is also low in calories, typically around 30 to 40 calories per cup compared to approximately 150 in whole dairy milk, and it is naturally free of lactose, making it a comfortable choice for the significant proportion of older adults who experience some degree of lactose intolerance. The single most important thing to remember when purchasing almond milk is to always choose the unsweetened variety. Sweetened almond milk can contain 5 to 7 grams of added sugar per cup, which completely eliminates the blood sugar advantage. When you are standing in the grocery aisle, look at the nutrition label and check 2 numbers specifically: total carbohydrates and added sugars. If total carbohydrates are 2 grams or less per serving and added sugars show 0, you have the right product. I want to share something from my clinical experience that illustrates just how significant this one change can be. I had a patient, a 68-year-old woman who was genuinely one of the most disciplined people I have worked with. She walked every day without exception, took her medication consistently, ate carefully, and was deeply committed to managing her condition well. Yet her fasting glucose readings were persistently between 160 and 175, and her post-breakfast numbers regularly reached 190 or 200. When we sat down and went through her entire morning routine in detail, her breakfast seemed balanced on the surface. Oatmeal, a small piece of fruit, and a full glass of whole dairy milk. I asked her to make exactly one change for 2 weeks. Replace the dairy milk with unsweetened almond milk and keep everything else identical. 3 weeks later, she came back with her glucose log. Fasting readings had dropped to between 130 and 140. Post-breakfast readings were consistently below 170. A single substitution, nothing else changed. 3 months later, her glycated hemoglobin had fallen by nearly half a point. Not from a medication adjustment, from a glass of milk. The second option on this list is unsweetened soy milk, and it brings a meaningful advantage over almond milk in one specific area that matters greatly for older adults with diabetes. Protein. Unsweetened soy milk contains 6 to 8 grams of protein per cup, comparable to dairy milk, while almond milk provides only about 1 gram. That protein helps sustain fullness between meals and support stable blood sugar without producing a glucose spike. The carbohydrate content of unsweetened soy milk sits at approximately 3 to 4 grams per cup with a low glycemic index, meaning the blood sugar effect is modest and gradual. It is also commonly fortified with calcium and vitamin D, nutrients of particular importance for adults over 60 who need to protect bone density, something especially relevant for people with diabetes who carry a somewhat elevated risk of osteoporosis over time. The texture of unsweetened soy milk is noticeably creamier than almond milk, and many people find it closer to the consistency of dairy milk, which makes the transition considerably easier. I had a patient of 67 who had been advised by her physician that she was losing muscle mass, a concern that arises with meaningful frequency in older adults managing long-term diabetes. We switched her from almond milk to unsweetened soy milk specifically to increase her daily protein intake without adding carbohydrates. She reported feeling more satisfied after breakfast, and her blood sugar remained just as stable as it had been with the almond milk. One straightforward adjustment that addressed 2 separate concerns at the same time. Always choose unsweetened. Sweetened soy milk products can contain 5 to 10 grams of added sugar per cup, which converts a beneficial choice into a problematic one. The third option is unsweetened cashew milk. In terms of carbohydrate content, it is similar to almond milk, typically 1 to 2 grams per cup in the unsweetened version, but it has a notably creamier texture and a slightly richer flavor that some people find more satisfying. This makes it particularly well suited to coffee or smoothies, where a denser consistency is desirable. Cashews are a natural source of magnesium, a mineral that plays a documented role in blood sugar regulation, and many adults with diabetes have lower magnesium levels than they realize without any obvious symptoms. Choosing foods and beverages that contribute magnesium naturally is a worthwhile consideration as part of a broader management approach. One of my patients, a 69-year-old woman, had tried almond milk and found it too thin for her taste. She described it as flavored water, not something she could see herself drinking long-term. We switched her to unsweetened cashew milk, and her response was entirely different. She said it finally felt like drinking something real. Her glucose response was essentially identical to what she had experienced with almond milk, stable and without meaningful spikes. But now she actually enjoyed it. And that matters more than people sometimes acknowledge. A dietary change that a person finds unpleasant is a change they will eventually abandon. Sustainability is a genuine part of effective diabetes management. The fourth option is one that has become more widely available in recent years and deserves attention particularly for older adults concerned about muscle preservation. Unsweetened pea protein milk, made from yellow peas, contains approximately 8 grams of protein per cup, comparable to dairy milk and soy milk, with a carbohydrate content of around 2 to 4 grams per cup. Like the other plant-based options, it is typically fortified with calcium and vitamin D. The high protein content makes it particularly valuable for adults over 60 who need to maintain or rebuild muscle mass, something that diabetes can accelerate the loss of over time. It is also free from lactose, tree nuts, and soy, making it an appropriate choice for people with allergies or sensitivities to those ingredients. I had a 72-year-old male patient whose physician had noted progressive muscle loss and recommended increasing his protein intake. We incorporated unsweetened pea protein milk into his breakfast in place of the low-fat dairy milk he had been using. His blood sugar remained stable, and at his 3-month follow-up, his physician observed that the rate of muscle decline had improved meaningfully, a small, consistent daily change that accumulated into a clinically observable outcome over time. Now we move into the options that require greater caution, and the fifth type on this list is one that has become extremely popular in recent years, which makes it particularly important to address clearly. Oat milk. Oat milk has genuine nutritional qualities. It is higher in fiber than most other milk alternatives, and some research suggests that beta-glucan, the type of fiber in oats, may have a beneficial effect on insulin sensitivity when consumed as part of a balanced diet. However, there is a critical number that anyone managing diabetes must understand before reaching for oat milk. Even unsweetened varieties contain between 15 and 20 grams of carbohydrates per cup. This is because oats are inherently a carbohydrate-dense food, and that carbohydrate content carries directly into the milk produced from them. For some people with diabetes who have good overall control and whose baseline readings are already well managed, moderate amounts of oat milk may not cause a problematic response. For others, particularly those who are already struggling with elevated morning readings or significant post-meal spikes, oat milk may simply be too high in carbohydrates to be a regular part of the breakfast routine. The most reliable way to find out which category you fall into is to test it directly, something I will describe in detail shortly. I had a 66-year-old patient who was genuinely fond of oat milk and wanted to incorporate it into her routine. We monitored her glucose carefully over 1 week, measuring before breakfast and 90 minutes after. With oat milk, her post-breakfast readings consistently landed between 175 and 185. With almond milk, those same readings were between 145 and 155. She told me she loved the taste of the oat milk, but that her own numbers had made the decision for her. She returned to almond milk. That kind of objective self-awareness based on real data is genuinely one of the most powerful tools available to anyone managing diabetes. The sixth option is one I generally advise my patients to avoid, and the reason is straightforward once you look at the numbers. Rice milk contains between 20 and 25 grams of carbohydrates per cup, most of which comes from the rice itself, a grain that breaks down into glucose rapidly in the digestive system. It is also very low in protein, which means it provides neither blood sugar stability nor lasting satiety. Drinking rice milk has a glycemic impact that is not meaningfully different from eating a serving of white rice, which is precisely what most people with diabetes are working hard to reduce in their overall diet. An important principle that I want to state clearly here because it comes up repeatedly. The fact that something is plant-based or described as natural does not automatically make it appropriate for diabetes management. What matters is the carbohydrate content, the source of those carbohydrates, and how rapidly they are converted to glucose in the bloodstream. I had a 71-year-old patient who had switched to rice milk years earlier due to a dairy allergy. His fasting glucose readings were persistently in the 180s, and he could not understand why, despite his efforts in other areas. Within 1 week of switching to unsweetened almond milk, his fasting readings had dropped to the 140s. He had never connected the rice milk to his glucose because he had always assumed that a plant-based product was inherently safe for his condition. That assumption had been working against him for years. The seventh option requires careful attention at the point of purchase more than any other on this list. Coconut milk in its beverage form, meaning the type sold in cartons designed for drinking rather than cooking, contains approximately 1 to 2 grams of carbohydrates per cup in the unsweetened variety, and the fats it contains do not trigger a blood sugar response. In that specific form, chosen correctly, it is a generally acceptable option for people with diabetes. The significant complication is that coconut milk comes in multiple forms with dramatically different nutritional profiles. Canned coconut milk, the thick version used in cooking, is much higher in fat and calories. And sweetened coconut milk, whether in cartons or cans, can contain substantial added sugars that entirely eliminate any benefit. Reading the label on coconut milk products is non-negotiable and requires more attention than with any other option on this list. Many packaging designs look similar between sweetened and unsweetened versions, And the distinction is easy to miss if you are not specifically looking for it. I had a 68-year-old patient who purchased what she believed was unsweetened coconut milk and consumed it for several days before noticing that her morning glucose after coffee had risen to 192 without any other explanation. When we reviewed her purchase together, she had inadvertently selected a sweetened variety. Once she switched to the correctly labeled unsweetened version, her reading returned to 138. The milk itself was not the problem. The added sugars she had not noticed were. And now we reach the eighth option, the one that most people with diabetes are still using every morning without having given it any particular thought: dairy milk. I want to approach this with genuine balance because dairy milk is a nutritionally substantive food. It provides protein, calcium, and vitamin D, all of which are meaningful for health, particularly for older adults. I am not suggesting that dairy milk is harmful in an absolute sense or that it needs to be permanently eliminated from everyone's diet. What I want to address clearly is its specific impact in the context of diabetes management. A cup of dairy milk contains 12 to 13 grams of lactose. For many adults over 60 managing diabetes, particularly those whose glucose regulation is already challenged, that lactose can contribute to a meaningful elevation in blood sugar that compounds with everything else in the morning meal and contributes to the unexplained high readings that so many people find frustrating. Some research has also suggested that lactose may affect insulin response in certain individuals, potentially making blood sugar control modestly more difficult over time. This does not affect every person equally, which is why individual testing matters so much. If you love dairy milk and feel strongly about keeping it in your routine, there are smarter ways to approach it. Choosing lower fat varieties reduces saturated fat intake. Limiting the portion to half a cup rather than a full cup reduces the lactose load. And pairing it with protein or fiber at the same meal slows the absorption of the lactose and moderates the glucose response. That said, in my clinical experience, the majority of patients who switch from dairy milk to unsweetened almond or soy milk see measurable improvements in their glucose control within 2 weeks. Not universally because individual responses genuinely vary, but consistently enough that it is worth trying. I had a 70-year-old male patient who was deeply resistant to this idea. He had drunk whole dairy milk his entire life and could not see why he should change something so fundamental to his routine. I proposed a simple agreement. Try unsweetened almond milk for exactly 2 weeks. If your numbers do not improve, go back to dairy milk. No permanent commitment, just a 2-week observation. He agreed. His average morning fasting reading dropped by 20 points over those 2 weeks. He stayed with the almond milk. Not because I persuaded him with words, but because his own glucose monitor persuaded him with data. Now, I want to give you a practical home test that you can begin this week without any special equipment, just the glucose monitor you likely already have. Over 3 consecutive mornings, drink your usual milk with breakfast exactly as you normally would. Measure your glucose before eating and again 90 minutes after finishing the meal. Record both numbers. Then for the following 3 mornings, switch to unsweetened almond milk while keeping everything else in your breakfast identical. Measure and record your glucose in exactly the same way. Compare the results across the 2 sets of readings. If your post-breakfast numbers are meaningfully lower with the almond milk, your body has given you a clear and unambiguous answer. If the difference is minimal, you have equally valuable information. The data from your own body in your own daily routine is more relevant to your specific situation than any general recommendation can be. Before I close, I want to share 3 observations that I consider essential context for everything we have discussed today. The first is that individual responses to the same food vary genuinely and significantly. 2 people with diabetes can drink identical milk from identical cups at identical times of day and have meaningfully different glucose responses. This is why personal testing matters so much and why the goal of this video is not to tell you what is universally true, but to give you the tools to discover what is specifically true for you. The second is that changing your milk is one component within a broader management framework. It is not a substitute for medication, physical activity, sleep, or stress management. It is one practical, accessible, low-effort piece that, combined with everything else, can contribute to improved control in ways that are measurable and meaningful. The third is about label literacy. Terms like natural, plant-based, dairy-free, and no lactose do not tell you what you most need to know when managing diabetes. The numbers that matter are total carbohydrates and added sugars on the nutrition facts panel. Make it a consistent habit to check those two values before purchasing any milk product regardless of what the front of the packaging claims. Here is your action plan starting this week. If you are currently drinking dairy milk or oat milk with your breakfast, purchase a carton of unsweetened almond milk or unsweetened soy milk. Run the 3-day comparison test I described using your glucose monitor. Record your readings honestly and let the numbers guide your decision. If you choose soy milk for its protein content, ensure the label shows 0 added sugars and no more than 4 grams of total carbohydrates per serving. If you try almond or cashew milk and find the texture too thin, try cashew milk for its creamier consistency before concluding that plant-based milk is not for you. And always, without exception, read the nutrition label before buying any new product regardless of how it is marketed. Your body is giving you feedback every single morning through those glucose readings. The goal is to learn how to listen to that feedback more precisely and to use practical, low-barrier changes like this one to give your body what it actually needs to function at its best. Small daily decisions made consistently over weeks and months are the foundation of meaningful long-term improvement in diabetes management. You have more influence over those numbers than you may realize. I am Dr. Andrew Parker, and thank you for watching Vital Health Insights. If this video gave you something useful, please share it with someone you know who is managing diabetes and might benefit from this information. And if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, I would genuinely encourage you to do so. Stay healthy, stay informed, and I will see you in the next video.